for me is just incredible. I remember when I first got on Facebook after, learning about some of the applications and the games and stuff, I just started looking for groups that had to deal with children of mental illness. I don't know why I was drawn to it. And I was just so completely surprised how many groups there are out there for, depression awareness and bipolar and schizoaffective and schizophrenic anonymous and adult children of this and that and that. And I write a lot in my group, or at least I did when I first started the group. And I remember saying, I don't want to make this a bashing session. I'm not even doing this to dishonor my mother. It's not. I'm kind of doing this because I was dishonored. And in a way, I want to bring my honor back and give the child in me a voice. But the positives I take from it, and I put this in my group, is, how do you move on? Because I think that's probably one of the recurring questions that different people who post on the walls, when we talk to each other, everybody's like, how do you move on? And for me, I have really had to think about the positives that my mom had, the positive sides of her. So I hold on to those first years where, I remember my mom just being this terrific, beautiful woman who smelled like cake and candy. I just hold on to those really early memories. And even though those years that were really difficult with a lot of the, not so good talk, I hold on to the gifts that my mother had. And she was great in the garden. She was at her best when she was in her yard, weeding and taking care of her roses. She grew fruit trees. Her yard, people used to just stop and compliment her on how well she kept the yard. From the outside, nobody would have known what was going on the inside. So my mother was really good at keeping a clean home. She was an excellent cook, and she taught us all that you could take salt and pepper and egg and flour and fry anything and make it taste like Louisiana. And she was talented. She had an eye for antiques. She was really very well read. We would watch Jeopardy some nights, and she would clear out all the category on social studies and literature and, art. She was just very well read for someone who didn't go to college. And she really, really, like I said, she totally appreciated my education. And that was one place where she built me up. And she would brag to everybody, my daughter's working on her master's degree and my daughter's working on her PhD, which I dropped out of. But she was just so proud of that education. And so I hold on to those parts of her that were good. Like I said, no matter how bad we were fighting, if I got sick, she'd be like, what's wrong with you? And if I said, I think I have the flu, she was in there with a bowl of soup. She would send my dad out for 7-Up. She never wanted to see her children suffer. And it was like she was the one who could cause the harm. But don't let anybody on the outside be the one, doing anything to her children. And I remember my mother didn't come to my wedding, and I was just devastated. She boycotted my wedding, and we hadn't been talking. And I just said, how could she be so cruel? But when my ex-husband and I were divorcing, she was there. So, whenever we were up against it, that's when my mom really showed that she was there for us. And, off camera we were talking, and it does come out that, and this came out when I was in therapy, but older, that a lot of what my mom did really probably came out of an overzealous, maybe a psychotic, maybe a not so healthy attempt to show just how much she really did love me. And I remember talking, when I went to England and I was talking to my pen pal's mom and I was telling her about my difficulties at home, I remember she said to me, your mother loves you. And I think a lot of people could have looked through a lot of that and said, yeah, all that keeping you protected from boys, that was her way of trying to show she loved you. And, keeping you, sending you out to the valley to go to school. She wanted you to have a good education. And, eventually you had to be exposed to the black world and the white world and see how the world was going to receive you. It was going to have to happen at some point, that I was going to have to find my way. So I have to look at those positives, that my mom did have. And she was very generous. She never wanted anyone to be hungry. If anybody ever asked her for $1 out on the street, she'd give them 2. And Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving Eve, my mom and I, we would cook. Like I said, she was great in the kitchen. I loved to be in the kitchen with her and in the yard. Those were the safest place to be with her. And she was always at peace cooking, and I think that's why I became a good cook. You know, that was something I took from her. And on Christmas Day and Thanksgiving, we would send my sister's friends out with so much food. And I love that part of my mother, being generous. And when she came off her job, no matter how difficult she was, she had lunch on the table for me. So I have to look at those good parts. She was a good seamstress. She could sew. I have to look at all those things that made her a good mother so that I can move forward and carry her with me. I talked about my faith being something else that was a positive. I learned to lean on God. I notice sometimes talking to other people on Facebook, some people get really offended when you say, you know, we got to pray about this, or, you know, seek God first, or, you know, you have to rely on your faith. And I would suggest to anyone, you know, I think people get angry at God. I'm not going to say I haven't had periods in my life where I have not been angry. It happened later in life. You know, you'd think that I would have been angry while I was going through the hell that I went through. But it wasn't until maybe a couple of years ago that I allowed myself to be angry. And then one day I just woke up and I realized, you know, being angry at God is like kicking a mountain until you're crazy, because it's not going to move and it's not going to change anything. So I always encourage people to think of that higher power, and however you can, just find something to have faith in that's greater than you, because there's got to be something greater than us. And whatever it is, it's got to have something positive. And I allow myself to have my bad days, but I have to hold on to the positive more so that I don't lose it. And so that's my suggestion to people, and it's also what's helped me to